Hi, so I'm Philip Hart. If we haven't met, I'm the person in the detector group who does a lot of the analysis and calibration of files for the detector. And I'm going to talk. So I'm going to talk a little more. It's not general facts, more analysis-related stuff, fact. And then hopefully we can, if there's stuff you want to talk about while I'm going through here, please let me know, and we'll alter the course a little bit. So the things I wanted to talk about were for planning CSPAD-based experiments, getting the best detector response while running, useful info for analysis, and a little bit about analyzing older data. So on the first topic, planning CSPAD-based experiments, the first thing to do is to talk to your point of contact at the hutch where you're going to be running. You might want to talk to them about what detectors are available and their current specs. As Gabriella showed you, the CSPAD has improved a lot over the years, so if you're used to using an older version, you might want to find out what the newer version does. You might want to talk to your point of contact about the particular science you're doing and whether or not there's a special detector configuration available for to optimize the detector performance for that science. These days, I think we've optimized the detector more, so there's less configuration than there was in the past, but there still might be some things we could do. It's good to find out what analysis tools are available, because it takes some setup time to get up to speed sometimes, and it's good to start that earlier rather than when the data is arriving at high rate. We're putting up on the web example data sets that you can play with to learn how the detector works and how to get the best results from it. And there's more about that in the data analysis workshop, which follows this. If people are interested in playing with some Monte Carlo data sets, if you want to put your PDF, your science into Monte Carlo and see what it looks like when you get it through the detector, then you can do that to some extent. We'd have to work together to do that probably. But for example, this is a smear mode Monte Carlo, which I have, and this distribution, the blue distribution, is without any charge sharing. So every photon goes into the particular pixel that it hit, and it puts all its charge there. And what you see is that there's a noise distribution and a signal distribution, and they're very, very, very separated because there's good signal to noise in the detector. But when you allow the photons to arrive near the edge of the pixel or near a corner, then some of the charge ends up in a neighbor, and some of the charge from the neighbor ends up in the pixel that you're looking at. So both those effects push some charge into this region, and it takes some charge out of this region, and it takes some charge out. So some of this is ending up here, and some of this is ending up in neighboring pixels. So that also changes this distribution a little bit. Okay. But if you're really concerned about your signal to noise and exactly how many photons you're going to be able to find, then this is a tool that allows you to estimate your efficiencies. So another thing to discuss with your point of contact is what calibration data sets are going to be needed for the experiment. At CXI, as Gabriella mentioned, the detector quadrants can move apart, so that makes that adds a parameter to the metrology. The way the metrology works for this detector is that when we assemble it, we put it under a microscope and we find out where all the tiles are with very high accuracy. And so for a 140K, we know where all the pixels are with high accuracy. And for a quadrant of the CXI detector, we know where all the pixels are with high accuracy. For the XPP cameras, all the tiles are on a solid base, so we know where all the pixels are. At CXI, when they move the quadrants around, that adds a little bit of uncertainty. So people take different kinds of data sets to understand exactly what the relative position of the quadrants is. So that's something you need to think about. It takes a little time and organization, but your point of contact will know about it. It just depends on your science, how much you care about that. If you really care about getting an extremely uniform response in gain, then we can help you out with that. I think it's a general principle that the best calibration comes from taking control samples that you understand really well in the detector as it's running and where it's running. So that's something you might consider if you really care. As mentioned, the detector response is becoming much more homogeneous. So this gain correction issue is rather less than it was in the past. So when I say you should go talk to your point of contact, it doesn't mean that we don't want to talk to you. It's just, this is how we organize things. So they may say, hey, yeah, you've got some specialized question, come talk to the detector group, or go talk to the offline group, or go look at this detector info online. So these talks should be available online, and the videos too, hopefully. We have a jargon file for people who don't understand what the heck we're talking about, because we come from different fields of science, and sometimes we use lingo which people don't know about. Like, I tend to say pedestal instead of dark, but that's when we say a pedestal correction or a pedestal script, that we mean the script that goes and finds the darks and produces the correction for that. And so so Sven was telling you about damage. In the DAC context, that means that there's some problem reading out the event. In the detector context, that means that every once in a while you might lose a pixel to radiation damage. Okay, but these things will be online somewhere soon, and you can find out as much about that as you like. Let's see. And as I mentioned before, you can look at detector papers, and then there'll be offline resources and sample data sets which will tell you more about how to apply corrections to the data as well. So we just talked about metrology. The idea is that the point of contact will take and mark the dark runs and press a button and produce the dark files, which will be instantly available. So if you're using the Slack offline infrastructure, you should have instant access to that stuff. There's also a lot of online monitoring tools, as we were just showing you. The point of that is not to make demos, but for people running their experiments to see, am I getting reasonable science? Do I understand how the detector is behaving? Is everything going well? Did I put a piece of something that I didn't want to in front of my signal? And so it's good to understand how to run that stuff. Your point of contact will be there to do it too, but you might say, hey, can we do this? And can we make that projection and so forth? Masking bad pixels we talked about. Another thing that the monitoring system at LCLS provides is plugin modules. So if you want to do something that the online monitoring doesn't do, that has some more sophisticated science analysis in it, then you can write a little script, or you can ask your point of contact to write a little script to do that. And as the data comes in, you'll be able to make those plots. One thing to note is that the data is available for the offline analysis as it is taken, pretty much a few seconds later. So if you're running PSANA, then you can tell it to use this experiment and this run, and you say live, And then as the data is coming off, it goes to a special fast feedback node, and you can run your offline analysis as the data is being taken. So you can have your very sophisticated analysis running in that way as well. Another thing that you can do, if it's easier or more convenient, is to run what we call offline AMI. It's being renamed PSAMI. And that gives you the online tools that running on the offline data. So if you've taken a lot of data and you like these tools that Sven was showing you and they're convenient for you, and you don't feel like learning how to run the PSANA, then you can do your analysis this way. So we think that for the CSPAD, with the state of the detector as it is, as you see it here, you should be able to run most analyses up to the science part with the SLAC stuff. Obviously, a lot of people are going to want to get a deeper understanding about all the corrections and make their own corrections if they have better ideas. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So as we saw before, each pixel can have a slightly different behavior from its neighbors, and so along with the event data, it's good to have some characterization of the pixel response. So you can get a dark map, you can have a gain map, a noise map, and it's good to know about the camera tiling. So it's not enough to say this is the in the camera array, this is the XY position. It's good to know what ASIC it belongs to, because the crosstalk in the camera is strongest on inside the ASIC. So pixels on one ASIC see crosstalk to a much greater extent than pixels on different ASICs. So some comments about the darks. They're stable, but if you really want to get the best single photon counting you can, then it's a good idea to update your darks more frequently than you would otherwise. If you're in a high radiation environment and you care about knowing the exact behavior of every single pixel, then it's important. Sometimes we get radiation damage in a pixel which changes its baseline significantly. It still works fine, but the full well capacity is decreased because you've basically put a lot of charge in it at the front end, so you can't put as many photons into it. So you'll saturate at a different level, and if you're being careful about that, then you might want to know that, and you can get that information out of the dark. Did that not make any sense to you, Garth? Or no? Oh, okay. The dark level is useful if so that was about masking. This is useful for masking bad pixels as well. If it's not behaving nicely, then it might have a very low noise because it's just always reading out the same value. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. So I usually say I want to mask out pixels that have a pedestal below 500 ADU. I want to mask pixels that have a pedestal level above 10,000 ADU, depending on how much I care about my full well capacity. And I mask noisy pixels, so that's the kind of thing you do for that. If you want to do a sophisticated crosstalk correction, then it's useful to know the dark level. The explanation for why this is the case is kind of long and involved, but what it comes down to is that in the CSPAD, the pixels that have lower signal level are fire first, and the ones that have a higher signal level fire later. So the ones that, when there's a crosstalk problem, it's because lots and lots of pixels are firing at the same time. So the distribution of where the pixels start off, which is their dark level, affects how sensitive they are to crosstalk.
So you're implying that you should take darks frequently. How does it take?
It doesn't. The crosstalk doesn't change. Well, I mean, if you're in a stable situation, you can take one dark, but you need to know about the dark if you want to do this. Uh-huh. It,
But you shouldn't live too long because you always have the thermal freeze anyway. And you should take a dark anytime you change settings or something.
the environment matters as well. At CXI, if you're under vacuum and the detector has been sitting there for 3 days, as Garth always asks us to make sure we get the camera in time for him to do, then it should be more stable. At XPP, if you know, it might be a little bit. Yeah.
TJ's point remains valid.
Yeah.
You notice there's more or less constant flux of the detector, and it's a relatively high level. And the thermal coupling, especially in CXI, is poor. So the
Yeah.
detector will warm up during the first development.
Yeah.
I mean, after a long time of radiation is dark, and you should still have some
That's
dark.
right.
So, right, so you make the noise map from your dark. So if you're really sensitive, if you want to know how well characterize the noise behavior well, then that's something you need to do, to keep track of. So just back on this last point, this is the crosstalk as a function of the dark level in the detector. So we measured this by going to our X-ray tube and shining a lot of light on one region of an ASIC and masking another region. And so I look at the shift of the dark level in that unilluminated level, in that unilluminated region when I put a lot of photons in a different part of the ASIC. So this is a low pedestal, and you see that the crosstalk here is about 1080U. And here, where there's a lot of, so the pedestal distribution looks like this. There's a lot more entries in this region, as you can see from the smaller error bars here. And here, there's a lot of pixels firing at the same time. And so they see a higher crosstalk. Here, where there's a high dark level, high pedestal level, all these guys have already fired. So these pixels don't really know about, hey, there's all this crosstalk thing, because there's just a few guys firing, and they're coming back down to a low crosstalk level. This is the shift in dark in an unilluminated region when I'm whacking a different part of the ASIC. And this is the pedestal level. This is the dark level. Yeah. So the effective shift is 1080U, which is a third of a photon. So, but if you're counting photons, then you care. Okay. Let's see. So as Gabrielle showed before, we've been improving the gain and noise homogeneity of the detector. In the first cameras, it was quite big. In the 1.5, it's order 10%-ish. In the next and final version of the CS pad, it's going to be about half that. This can be corrected for using a low intensity flat field. The gain variations are associated with these crosstalk issues, and it turns out that when you put a lot of photons on the detector, the gain inhomogeneity goes away. So it depends on what science you're using, how you want to deal with that if you need to. So similarly, the noise has been improving. The noise homogeneity has been improving. The noise level itself hasn't been changing. As I showed earlier, you care about charge sharing when you're trying to count single photons. It's something to be aware of. Okay. Not worry about that. The common mode correction. So the dark level fluctuates on the ASIC level, and it can be corrected by going and looking for pixels that didn't get hit with a photon and saying that, well, I've made my dark correction, I know they should be 0, and then I can calculate this overall level and correct for it. The correction is typically about a few ADU. So if you're counting 24 ADU objects, then you care some. If you're working at higher energies, then there's no point in bothering. And this takes out some of the crosstalk correction, actually, if you're running it, because in this case you would take something out like this. There'll still be some residual effect, obviously, but for counting photons, at least you won't have a baseline of 20 ADU off. A few sanity checks I put down. This is not a CS pad detector specific thing. I always like to make a photon hip map where I count the number of photons that I've gotten in each region of the detector, in each pixel. If I see a hot area, then I know I've messed up my masking. Gabriella showed a plot where that was a problem. That was my fault. I just hadn't applied the correction. If you're trying to be very careful about getting every photon and reducing your background, it makes sense to make sure that you're not getting more hits from noisy pixels than you ought to. So that's something to check. It's good to understand if your counting rates are reasonable given the running conditions. We always like to check when we can whether or not high fluence shots and low fluence shots behave differently. If your analysis is sensitive to this, then that's something you need to think about. If you make a profile plot, you should look at the scatter plot. I always tell people to plot the number of entries on their histograms because sometimes you don't fill them right and you confuse yourself, and I do that too to myself. So I've got a slide on corner cases in older data. We're mostly looking forward to new detectors in our group, but obviously there's a lot of older data. So I've listed a couple of things which it was hard for the detector to do. The main one is to give you small signal response when you're whacking another part of the detector. So that's just hard for us to do with the CS pad. And if you're trying to look for single photons when you've got 1,000 photons in a different part of an ASIC, then that's difficult, and it's something we can talk about, but it's hard. I would suggest looking at the dark dependence that I was just showing you for the crosstalk as a way of trying to get a handle on that. And also another thing to do is to try to restrict the fluence range that you're looking at. So don't look at the low fluence shots, don't look at the high fluence shots, look at the medium fluence shots where the detector behavior is similar, and that should simplify the analysis. The regions where the detector behaves in a simple way for the older detector, especially if you have low illumination, if you have lots of photons everywhere, then a lot of these crosstalk effects go away because you're causing the pixels to fire at very different times, so they don't all fire at once, and that reduces the crosstalk. And the energy scales for the crosstalk can be roughly identified by looking at how big your dark how wide the dark distribution is. Okay, do we have anything? Okay, here's some text to look at. The first thing, if you haven't read a detector book, would be to read Knowles. Here's some, Spieler has some stuff on the web which is interesting, and I like Janasik. And this is about CCDs, but there's also a lot of stuff about what's going on in the sensor, and it's fun to read. So that's a big plus. For analysis, this is an easy book. These are all particle physics things, but they're useful for understanding statistics. Sorry, what? For the analysis part, I'm saying here. This is a good text. This is good if you like math. Yeah. So I think that's the main part of my talk.